Welcome back to Monday Musings, a casual conversation about culture and theology. I'm Justin Ely.
And I'm Daniel Chen. We're just a couple guys talking about some stuff.
The stuff we've been talking about is forgiveness. We are concluding our series on forgiveness. Last week we talked about kind of the internal way to heart forgive. And then this week we're talking about external forgiveness, how to go about reconciling a broken relationship. So we hope this series has been helpful. We've been using Tim Keller's book, Forgive, Why Should I, and How Can I? Would really recommend you pick it up and read it.
Yeah, it's been a super helpful series for me. And, you know, that's the funny thing doing this podcast. It's like, you know, we started this podcast to help listeners, right?
Right.
But it's really been helpful for myself just to even reflect on forgiveness, how difficult it is, but how necessary it is, both for our souls, but also for the good of society.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But before we get to forgiveness, we got to talk about some important things, like the restaurant of the month.
Yeah.
What's your restaurant of the month, Daniel?
Okay. I'll go first because
I got a surprise.
Yeah,
people,
gotta...
whatever you're thinking, whatever concept you have of who I am, I'm going to break that open.
Yeah. So my restaurant of the month is called Tokyo Bay Japanese Restaurant. And so I actually did a restaurant of the month maybe 6 to 8 months ago called Sushi U in Kennesaw. This is a similar concept where you sit down. It's not a buffet. Everything's freshly made to order. But you just check off these boxes, like whichever sushi or appetizers or entrees that you want. This place is both closer if you live in the Johns Creek, Alpharetta area. It's in Alpharetta. Maybe technically Roswell. And it's better. It's got a wider range of variety, and it's better food.
Well, there you go.
And so if you like sushi, if you like all you can eat, if you like hibachi, if you like fried rice, if you like appetizers, if you like dessert, this is the place for you. I would highly, highly recommend. This is the first restaurant I'm taking Meredith to, my wife too, after she gives birth to our fourth child, because you know she can't eat sushi. She loves spicy tuna rolls and stuff.
Right.
They have this roll there. I love shrimp tempura rolls. She loves spicy tuna, and they have one that is a shrimp tempura spicy tuna roll. It's super good.
She can't eat it right now.
She
right?
can't eat it
because
right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this thing where I gave up eating deep fried foods for 75 days. It's killing me, and so I can't go either because shrimp tempura is deep fried.
Yeah.
Spring rolls are deep fried, and so I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah,
so,
you are.
Yeah, but it's killing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's fantastic. For dinner, it's like $30-ish, so it's not super cheap. But
Sure.
you know, for sushi, it's not bad.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, last time I went, I had 5 rolls, so it was easily. You know, but then I had all the appetizers and stuff too.
Yeah, you did.
But for lunch, I think it's like $19. It's really not that bad.
It's sad that you say that.
What?
But that is our current
I know.
inflationary world.
And
Yeah.
for all you can eat sushi,
Yeah.
like this isn't like the highest quality sushi you can get, but it's decent. It's much higher quality than a buffet.
Sure.
So $19, not that bad.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Yeah, but
Places like this even 5 years ago was like $12, $13.
that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
All right, so my restaurant of the month. This is coming from the man who brought you Marcel, Little Alley's, Table in Maine. Is Popeyes this month. My restaurant of the month is Popeyes because
When you said this to me initially, I was trying to think of what kind of fancy restaurant is also named Popeyes, and I was super confused.
just the regular old Popeyes. Hillary and I were on the road a couple weeks ago, and we stopped by Popeyes for dinner and had the Popeyes chicken sandwich.
What'd you get for your side? Just fries or
Fries.
Okay.
And
I'm a red beans and rice guy. And theirs is like, for a fast food restaurant, theirs is excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, their fries are good, but they're seasoned. You know, they're kind of
They
Cajun.
are. It's a little bit like Checkers fries.
Yeah. And that chicken sandwich is so much like the breast is bigger and juicier than Chick-fil-A.
Oh, my gosh.
Big time. It's probably like twice the size of a Chick-fil-A chicken.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to have this conversation right now, but it is definitely tastier than Chick-fil-A's sandwich.
Yeah, it makes me a little guilty saying that, but
It's a better chicken sandwich. I'll give you a couple reasons. So first of all, most people like Chick-fil-A because of the service.
Yeah.
Their food is good, but their service is amazing.
Yeah.
And as good, and Popeye's service is
Horrendous.
It's
Yes.
terrible.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting? If you're like from the South, Popeye's is actually a Southern fried chicken,
Sure.
thickly
Yeah.
breaded.
Yep.
And this is gonna sound funny, but Chick-fil-A's is almost more of like a schnitzel. It's like lightly breaded.
That's
it's
true.
It's really not a Southern
true.
fried chicken, like in what you would think of like in a traditional sense.
That's true.
And I think that actually makes a difference.
Man, schnitzels.
Schnitzels.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think Chick-fil-A sandwich is very tasty,
Yeah.
but
I mean, Popeyes is
Popeyes.
it's great.
If you could get through the service,
Yeah, and the one we
It's
stopped
fantastic.
at, the one we stopped at the other day was pretty good.
hey, good. Yeah.
So Popeyes. There's my restaurant of the month. So for all you people that think I'm just so bougie that I would never, I rarely, but I do. Popeyes. All right, we're talking about forgiveness using Tim Keller's book, Forgive, Why Should I, and How Can I? And this week we come to chapter 11 from his book. And we're going to kind of use this to close out our series on this. So we're talking about how to extend forgiveness on like a practical external level.
Yep.
It is interesting, a little teaser to buy the book. He starts this book with a quote from Ted Lasso.
Hey, really?
Which, have you seen that show?
No, I need to. I've heard it's amazing.
It is like, so disclaimer, it does have a lot of language.
Right.
It is like strangely profound.
I've
Is how
heard
I
that.
describe it.
I've heard that.
Like it's kind of a comedy, but there are like some really deep themes on grace, forgiveness, and fatherhood in this show.
Really?
That this show does a better job portraying grace probably than maybe any Christian movie I've seen.
Really?
Now, not full grace at the extent of the cross, obviously, but like person to person.
Yeah.
There's some really profound moments, and he quotes.
Man, I need to watch it.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. But we're going to look at a few texts today on how to forgive externally, and give some of Keller's thoughts on it, on how we do it. So we're going to look at Matthew 5, Matthew 18, and Romans 12. So first, he calls this the principle, Jesus on anger, from Matthew 5, 21 to 25. You have heard that it was said to people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court. And if anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together in the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. So Keller points out he's giving an exposition on the sixth commandment, you shall not kill, thou shalt not kill. And he extends this into the heart. And these are some really hard verses to obey.
Yes. Yeah. We've talked about how forgiveness is hard, but it's also a reminder of like how easy it is for us to, the Jefferson story where he like cut out all the passages that he didn't like.
Sure.
I'm like, how often do we as Christians do that in our own heart unknowingly?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. These are some tough passages to do.
So he points out that some have said that Jesus is prohibiting all anger here, but that's not what he's doing. He said, we know that God himself gets angry. Anger is not intrinsically sinful. He said it can be energy released to remove an object that is harming something we love. We know that Jesus got angry, but he is talking about sinful anger here. And he said 2 examples he gave help us understand it. If your anger leads you to call someone Raka, which in Aramaic is a word that means to be inconsequential or you fool, it's sinful. So to do so, even in one's heart, is to dismiss, disdain, and to belittle. To do so out loud is to punish and hurt, Keller said.
Yeah, and in the ESV, I think it's translated insults.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Keller writes, so when we get angry, we should ask, what am I defending? If we do that, we will see how often we are defending our ego, pride, agendas, and image. God's anger is always righteous because he is perfect love. So his anger is always in defense of the good, true, and beautiful. And his anger is always released to destroy evil, sin, and death. He says, before Jesus gives us practical instruction on reconciliation in the Christian community, he warns us in the strongest terms about sinful anger as a violation of the commandment against murder. Just as an acorn contains the entire tree and millions of other acorns, all within its small cup, so murder begins with the seed of inward sinful anger. Yeah, so before we extend practically, we got to look again internally at, is our anger righteous or is it sinful?
Could you give example? You think it'd be helpful to say what does righteous anger look like? And then how is it that because I hear this and I'm like, you know what? It's just so easy for us to like in our like as we're being sanctified as Christians, the reality is that our motivations are oftentimes just mixed.
Yeah.
Right? And so what does this look like? Like how do we actually sort that out in our hearts?
Yeah, I've heard John Piper talk about this, that he's like, people often point out that Jesus got angry too,
Right.
So not all anger is sinful. But he's like, there's a big difference between me and Jesus.
You're right.
And I'm a sinner.
Right.
And he's not.
Right.
And so it's probably rare that there's not some mix
Right.
of righteous and unrighteous anger in our anger.
I think, for example, if I see someone hurting my daughter, me being angry is righteous. That's good.
It is. It is.
But then what I know in my heart, I'd be like, I'm going to kill this guy, even if it's not literal.
Right.
I'm going to, I want this harm to befall on this person. Then all of a sudden, it's easy for you to have kind of like a good righteous anger that leads to a sinful anger. It's both. Both are happening, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes. So I think it's probably safe to assume most of the time it's either probably sinful anger entirely,
right,
or mixed between
righteous
sinful and
and.
I mean, I think there can be instances like you talked about harming of your child that is maybe 99% righteous,
right?
But there probably is a 1% mixed in there.
Yeah, it's just so easy to let sinful thoughts enter your mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, that's a reflection of what's really going on.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, I think that's just helpful to talk about on a practical sense,
Yeah. But Keller talks about in this passage, the urgency of forgiveness. Jesus says in Matthew 5, if you're offering your gift to the altar and you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, so it's not even necessarily that you have something against them, right? I mean, it's you're kind of engaging in, this would have been first century Jewish worship, so ours would look a little different, but you're engaging in worship and you remember you got a broken relationship. He's basically saying, stop singing the song and go and reconcile with the person that has something wrong against you. So there is some urgency to forgiveness. Like, don't just let things linger. Go. Like,
yeah.
There's this like positive, urgent kind of command to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that honestly is convicting for me.
Yeah, because I kind of just let things kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of like, is it worth the confrontation?
Right.
Is it worth it? But the scriptures say, go.
Go.
Yeah, it's very convicting for me.
So then we come to Matthew 18, 15 to 17 on really kind of how do we go? How do we do that? So Jesus says, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. So Keller gives a few kind of points on how we do this. First is we go privately. And this is where most of us go off and get it wrong. This is where I get it wrong, right? So when I get wronged, I often want to hear other people agree with me about how I was wrong.
No,
right?
I feel that.
So I have a tendency to, I want to voice how I was hurt to others.
Right.
And this is in direct violation to what Jesus says. You go alone to the other person, one-on-one. I think it is, fair to also give a caveat here. I think when you're talking about like abuse or things of that nature, right? We need to have some wisdom in how we apply this one-on-one, right? So you may be skipping to involving others based upon the nature of what happened to you.
Surprise! Life has a lot of nuance to
right.
it. Yeah.
Right. Shocker. But in most circumstances, we should go, which also means he talks about this. This is like the opposite of like ghosting people and canceling people, right? So we just say, you're dead to me. I'm done with you. No, but he's saying, you go. You were wronged. You go and seek reconciliation.
Yeah.
So we don't ignore people. We don't cancel people. We go to them and try to initiate reconciliation.
I mean, this keeps coming back to Jesus, right? Because you imagine if Jesus was just like, I'm done with you. I'm canceling you. Like, it, Right. It's like, we'd all be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second thing Keller points out is that we go positively. He does say we have the phrase point out their fault, which from the Greek means a sharp, painful admonition. But he said the goal of criticism here is important. We're criticizing, we're pointing out their fault, we're pointing out what they did, not to win an argument, but to win the person.
Yeah, that's a really good.
The point is not, I just want to dunk on you. I want to just destroy you. The point is, I'm pointing out your fault. I'm truth-telling. We've talked a lot about that in this series, that it's not sweeping it under the rug. It's not avoiding it. I'm pointing out your fault, not in the hopes of just owning you, but in the hopes of winning you back and restoring a relationship.
Yeah.
So go privately, go positively, and he says third, go repeatedly. He said sometimes we read this text and we just assume that means, well, I've gone to them once and I've told them their fault and they didn't respond. So
right.
But sometimes this might take multiple conversations. We shouldn't assume everything that's been like wronged from us can be solved with just one conversation. Sometimes we're going to need several talks.
Right.
And maybe you're not ready to branch out to other people yet. We just need to be patient with people sometimes and having multiple conversations. But the next step, the fourth step, he says, if needed, is to involve the community, right? So Jesus says, if it doesn't work one-on-one, take 2 or 3 with you.
Right.
So at some point in the forgiveness restoration process, we're involving other people. And like we said, if you were like physically harmed by someone, there is probably wisdom in jumping to this step from the beginning. If your safety is in danger to confront a person, and then finally, the final stage is to involve the church, and this gets to church discipline. And if this, especially if this is a matter between 2 members of a local church, if the goal is to find reconciliation one-on-one, and if that can't happen with 2 or 3 others, but then if that can't happen, to involve the whole church in this matter, because unity in the church matters, and we don't want people harboring anger and bitterness and forgiveness toward one another in churches. And so that's why Jesus gives us Matthew 18. So painful, but needed. So
Yeah.
go privately, go positively, go repeatedly. If needed, involve others. And then beyond that, if needed, tell it to the church.
I'm just thinking about our culture. And our culture is just like, don't go. But if need to, post it on Twitter. It's like,
Right.
we skip all these steps.
Right, you just skip all the steps.
Yeah.
And Keller takes Matthew 5:18, and he draws some principles from it. And he says, from these two passages emerge a single principle. If a relationship has broken down, it is always your move to initiate relationship repair. He said, Matthew 5 says, if your brother has something against you, go to him. While Matthew 18 says, if you have something against your brother, go to him. So it doesn't matter who started it. A Christian is responsible to begin the process of reconciliation, regardless of how the alienation began.
Yeah.
That's huge, because normally it's like, we sit with our arms crossed, and we're like, well, if you come to me with enough groveling, I'll consider it.
Yeah, it's like
I'm not calling you.
It's like what we talked about last week. It's like the owing, right?
Right.
Making them pay the debt, right?
Right. And then he says this, second, while sometimes the perpetrator's wrongdoing is egregious and unprovoked, as in the case of sexual assault, in many cases of relationship breakdown, there are usually some things for which both sides can confess and both sides can forgive. Seldom does just one party bear all the blame for a tattered relationship. Almost always, reconciliation is best done by both repenting and forgiving, by both admitting you're wrong and pointing the wrong of the other. That's helpful.
If you are married,
Cool.
listen to that again.
Just do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So two kind of principles. They're looking at Matthew 5 and 18 together. And then finally we come to Paul, the Apostle Paul, on reconciliation from Romans chapter 12, verses 14 to 21. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Again, Romans 12, 14 to 21. He says this, the principle of this is do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And then he gives kind of 5 practical ways to overcome evil with good. So the first, he says, is to pray for them. So if you want to overcome evil with good in a relationship, if you want to seek reconciliation, first pray for them. He quotes, bless those who persecute you. Keller says to bless may mean many things, but above all, it means to pray for them, to pray for God to bless them. It is hard to stay angry at someone if you are praying for them. It is hard to stay angry unless you feel superior, and it is hard to feel superior if you are praying for them, since in prayer you approach God as a forgiven sinner. Praying for them knocks down the superiority, and it turns your heart so you are starting to will them good. We talked about this some last week, willing them good. But praying for someone is a great way to start and will really change your heart in the process.
Yeah.
Number 2, the second way to overcome evil with good is to forgive them. Paul says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Do not take revenge, but overcome evil with good. So this is kind of the heart forgiveness that we talked about last week, going through that process, absorbing the debt rather than forcing them to pay the debt.
Yeah. Once again, it's so hard. It's so easy to want to repay evil with evil.
Yeah. Just get even, right?
Yeah.
Number 3, and this is surprising. I wouldn't have myself immediately caught this from the text. Don't avoid them. He says, verse 18 reads, if it is possible, so far it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Some say, I have forgiven the person, but I want nothing to do with them. But that is actually a form of retaliation. Even if the other person remains hostile so you can't restore the relationship, you don't contribute to the hostility. You act as kindly, as helpfully, and as respectfully as you can. You are always seeking a relationship. Man, that, again, like, it flies in the face of cancel culture.
Yeah.
So not avoid them. So, I mean, a good question is, like, if there's someone that has wronged you, and you're convinced, we've reconciled, we're good because we're not calling each other names. If you, like, see them in a crowd, do you, like, consciously or subconsciously walk the other way? You know, if it's someone at church, do you see them seated and you purposely choose to sit on the other side of the room? If that's the case, you're probably not reconciled, like Paul would have you be.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about there's, like, depending on the nature of the offense and the lack or substance of repentance, a relationship may not be possible.
Right.
But in your heart, are you avoiding? And then there is, like when you're thinking about an abuser, there could be real, like, physical or emotional harm for you to even be around the person.
Yeah.
Right. So there is, like we've said, there's nuance here.
Right.
But in your heart, are you seeking to kind of cancel them? I think
Yeah.
is what he's getting at here. Number 4, give them what they need to whatever degree they allow. Quoting Paul, Keller says, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. This means if there is an opportunity to do something for the wrongdoer in order to meet his or her needs, do it. This takes much discernment, however. As we have been saying, it may be that what they need is a confrontation, since it is never loving to make it easy for someone to go on sinning. If you are afraid to confront, you may be failing to love them. If you confront with too much relish and anger, you may be failing to love them. If you give them help in such a way that enables them to abuse you, you are failing to love them enough to want them to change. He's so helpful in the nuance here that he gives in this book.
This is, man, that's so hard.
Yeah.
Man, forgiveness is hard, man.
This is not easy.
Yeah.
And then number 5, he says, do it humbly. Keller writes, verse 16 says, all this must be done without pride or conceit. Some, quote, forgiveness is done to take the high moral ground, to show one's superiority. As the scarce quoted in the previous sentence shows, it isn't real forgiveness at all. Forgiveness is a gift given by a sinner, saved by sheer grace to another. If you confront not for their sake, not for truth's sake, not for the world's sake, but for your sake, you will make the perpetrator worse. But if you have the humility and love to have forgiven them, they may not like what you are saying, but they will see that you care for them, and you may actually be able to help them. It's good. And then he ends it with this. He talks about what are the implications of leave room for God's wrath. I will repay, says the Lord. And we can forgive because we know at the end of it all, God will not allow any injustice to go unnoticed or unsettled. So all justice will either fully be done in hell or on the cross.
Yep.
At the end of time, no injustice remains. So no one gets away for anything.
You know, it's not a cop-out, but it is reassuring.
It is.
You don't have to get revenge because God will actually get justice.
Yeah.
Right? And once again, I hope what you've heard the past 4 weeks isn't that you sweep it under the rug or pretend it didn't happen or don't even seek for justice. I think seeking justice is part of forgiveness, right? But at the end of the day, if you see someone, quote unquote, get away with it, they have not.
They have not.
They never will.
And this is like, we have to understand like the enormity of the cross, the like death of the Son of God. Like either that sin was put on him, and there's no, like that's not, getting off easy.
Yeah.
Either that or an eternity in hell.
Yep.
I mean, that's it. So nothing, and this is the beauty of the gospel and the glory of like the Christian truth is no one gets off for horrors that they have done.
Right.
And that's really important. So I think when we feel like, when we want to say, but to forgiveness, we got to remember that. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, declares the Lord.
Yeah.
And all accounts will be settled at the end. And so we rest in his justice. We rest in his sovereignty. We rest in the fact that God doesn't overlook anything.
Yeah.
And that can give us peace.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can view it from two sides. It's like we both celebrate that God is a just God, and it's terrifying.
Sure.
And that's why it comes down to the cross, because if God's justice, if I get what I actually deserve, that's scary.
Yeah.
But if Jesus took it for me, that's grateful. And then you got to really think, if the person who wronged you is a believer,
Yeah.
then Jesus died for their sin too.
Yeah. Yep.
And that should turn our hearts.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
The cross is the starting point and the ending point for forgiveness as we seek it for others. So we hope this series has been helpful to you. Hopefully we've all kind of had some time to ponder, like, are there people in my life I need to forgive?
Right.
Are there things I've done to others that need to be forgiven, that I need to seek forgiveness for? So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, really would encourage you, get in the book, Forgive, Why Should I, and How Can I? Any closing thoughts on the whole forgiveness discussion?
Yeah, we should go do this. It's like
Go and do likewise.
Yeah, we should. I mean, man, I really hope the next time someone wrongs us, or you guys as one of the listeners, really, really consider these things.
Yeah.
This is so important.
It is. It is. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Monday Musings.